Maybe you have spent the entire day feeling like an unfinished sketch, a character whose edges are still too sharp, or a story that keeps stalling right when it needs to make sense. It is the specific weight of that feeling, the one that tells you your personality is a rough-hewn surface that needs constant sanding down before anyone else is allowed to look at it closely. You are lying there, perhaps listening to the house settle around you, feeling the internal itch of wanting to smooth out your character, your past, and your choices, as if being unpolished is a dangerous state of being. The air in your room might feel still, but inside, you are busy. You are holding the grain of your own life, feeling the knots and the natural textures, and you are trying to convince yourself that these irregularities are flaws rather than part of the wood itself. You have been carrying the sandpaper of perfectionism, thinking that if you just worked hard enough, if you just sanded down your reactions and your history, you would finally be smooth enough to be held without fear. It is exhausting to be your own critic and your own carpenter at the same time. You are not broken, and you do not need to be reshaped tonight to be worthy of rest. What you are feeling right now is not a failure of character, but rather the heavy fatigue of trying to exist in a state of constant, manufactured gloss. There is a curious thing about the human heart, and it is a piece of wisdom that the old teachers often pointed toward. The mind assumes that peace is found in the final shiny finish, that if you could only sand away the history of your mistakes and the natural unevenness of your temperament, you would finally arrive at a place of permanent safety. But the paradox is that the more you polish, the thinner the wood becomes, and the more fragile your sense of self turns out to be. True stability does not come from removing the grain. It comes from finally putting the sandpaper down, from acknowledging that the rough texture you have been so desperate to hide is the exact place where your strength has been growing all along. Tonight, we are not going to force your mind into a silence that it is not yet ready for. We will not try to erase the memories that keep circling, nor will we attempt to polish over the worries that feel like splinters under the skin. Instead, we are going to explore the idea of the unpolished stone. We are going to allow ourselves to see that what we have been calling flaws are actually the deep, honest markers of a life being lived in full. If you feel like you are still holding on to the need to present a finished, seamless version of yourself to the world, notice how that feels in your chest. Does it feel tight? Like a muscle that has been held in a flexed position for too long? It is okay to notice that tightness, and it is entirely safe to let it be there for a moment, without trying to solve it. You do not need to do anything with that sensation. You only need to acknowledge that it is a response to the fatigue of trying to be perfect. Take a slow breath, just enough to let your lungs expand naturally, and notice the way the air moves through the room around you. You are held by the surface beneath you, and you are safe to let your guard down because you are not under any obligation to perform for anyone, not even for your own mind. We often believe that if we stop the internal work of perfecting ourselves, we will lose our shape or fall apart. But the truth is much softer, much more like the way a forest floor receives the leaves that fall. It does not judge them for being dry or misshapen. It simply lets them settle. And in that settling, it turns them into the very soil that supports the next season of growth. You have been treating yourself like a piece of furniture that needs to be sold, but you are not an object to be displayed. You are a living, breathing process, and you have been doing the hard work of being human for a long time. it is entirely possible that the peace you have been searching for has been waiting just beneath the urge to be someone else, someone polished and smooth and impossible to criticize. Tonight, we will look at this from a distance, through the lens of those who lived before us, and we will do it with the understanding that you are already enough. You do not have to be a finished masterwork. You are allowed to be in progress, to be full of grain and knots and natural history. As you lie here, simply notice the sensation of your own body being heavy, without needing to adjust your position to look more graceful. Notice the sound of your own breath, not as a metronome that you have to keep in time, but as the tide that moves through you naturally. There is no destination we are racing toward, and there is no grade you are being given for how well you can let go. You are doing the work of simply existing, and that is a profound and sacred thing for a tired heart. As we move into the first story, let your mind drift away from the lists of things you think you should have done better today, and bring your focus toward a small mountain workshop where the air smells of pine needles and damp earth. There is a quietness there that you can step into, a space where the tools are heavy and the light is shifting, and where a young traveler is about to learn that the most beautiful things in this world are not the ones that have been sanded into nothingness. You have arrived at the threshold of a different way of seeing, and you are safe to proceed at your own pace. High in the northern reaches of the valley, where the mountain mist clings to the hemlocks, like a damp shroud, there lived a young stone carver named Jiro. His workshop was a small, three-walled structure open to the biting wind, cluttered with fragments of granite, and the persistent, fine dust of his trade. Jiro was known for a specific, exhausting kind of perfection. He believed that if he could carve a statue so smooth, so perfectly unmarred, it would eventually reflect the moonlight as clearly as a mountain lake. He spent his days and nights with a heavy, coarse whetstone, scouring the faces of his creations, trying to rub away the natural irregularities of the rock. He was convinced that every visible line, every slight indentation was a failure on his part. He felt that if he just worked a little harder, if he just filed down the rock one more time, he would finally produce something worth looking at. One morning, when the grey light was barely strong enough to distinguish the floor from the workbench, Jiro was hunched over a heavy slab of river stone. He had been working for 3 days to remove a single, stubborn ridge that refused to flatten. His hands were raw, and the skin of his palms had long ago hardened into rough calluses. The sound of his whetstone against the granite was a rhythmic, scraping drone that filled the silence of the workshop. He did not notice the tall, thin figure standing at the edge of his workspace until the shadow of the man touched the stone. It was a wandering weaver, a man who travelled from village to village with a wooden loom strapped to his back, but he carried no finished textiles today. He only carried a single, unravelled thread, loose and tangled, looped around his finger. Jiro stopped, his breath coming in shallow, jagged gasps, his heart still hammering with the rhythm of his own labour. The weaver did not speak at first. He simply walked to the corner of the workshop, picked up a discarded, uneven fragment of limestone, and held it up toward the thin sliver of morning light. He turned the stone slowly, watching the way the shadows fell into the natural fractures and deep crevices of the rock. He did not try to smooth it. He did not pick up a chisel. He only looked at the way the light caught the rough edges, making the stone appear to glow from within, as if it held the very essence of the mountain. Jiro wiped his brow, confused by this quiet inspection, and asked why the traveller was paying such close attention to a piece of refuse. The weaver smiled, a slow, patient expression that seemed to mirror the stillness of the trees outside. He set the stone back down, but he did not place it neatly. He let it fall naturally, so that one end rested higher than the other. He turned to Jiro and asked a question that felt like a pebble dropped into a deep well. He asked if the stone had chosen its own shape, or if it was merely suffering under the weight of someone else's expectation. Jiro did not know how to answer. He looked down at his own whetstone, the tool he had used to try and force the granite into submission, and for the first time he saw it not as a tool of mastery, but as an instrument of constant, unceasing friction. The weaver then sat on a stool and began to untangle the thread around his finger. He did not pull at the knots. He did not try to snap the cord to make it straight. He simply teased the fibers apart with the lightest touch, letting the tension fall away, thread by thread, until the tangle simply dissolved into a soft, messy pile of wool. Jiro watched the thread fall. He realized that the weaver was not trying to make the yarn perfect. He was only trying to let it be itself. The weaver told him that the most beautiful patterns in the tapestry were the ones that allowed for the knots, for the places where the thread had been joined or frayed. He said that a tapestry without any texture would be nothing more than a wall, and a person who tried to smooth over their own history would eventually become as hollow as an empty bowl. Jiro looked at his half-carved statue, the one he had spent days trying to polish into a mirror. He saw the marks where he had ground down the stone, the thin, pale scars where the granite had been forced to give way, and he suddenly felt the weight of his own exhaustion. He had been trying to erase the very thing that made the stone a mountain. The weaver did not offer a lecture. He did not tell Jiro to stop carving or to change his life. He simply stood up, placed his hand on the young man's shoulder, and gestured toward the mist-filled valley below. He suggested that if Jiro wanted to know what the moonlight truly looked like, he should go outside and look at the actual moon instead of trying to catch it in a piece of polished rock. Jiro stood in the doorway, letting the cold air touch his face, and for the first time in years, he did not reach for his chisel. He did not check to see if his workshop was tidy. He just stood there, breathing in the scent of damp pine, and felt the immense, terrifying, and wonderful freedom of having absolutely nothing to fix. In this exact moment, he realized that the stone was not his enemy, and his own imperfection was not a problem to be solved. It was merely the landscape of his own life, and it was waiting for him to finally live in it, rather than trying to sculpt it into someone else's ideal. The workshop was silent now, and the whetstone sat idle on the bench, covered in a light dusting of grey stone, and the young man felt the heavy, aching pressure in his chest finally begin to diffuse, like smoke dissipating in the wind. That quiet scene in the workshop offers us a mirror for our own inner labor. You might wonder why the weaver did not reach for a tool or try to fix the stone himself. It is because he understood something that often escapes us when we are tired and searching for relief. He saw that Jiro was not just carving granite. He was carving himself. He was attempting to shave away the natural grain of his own character, believing that the knots and the rough patches were defects that kept him from being enough. This is the hidden weight that keeps so many of us awake at night. We act as if our lives are statues that must be polished to a perfect, seamless sheen before we are allowed to rest. When you feel that specific, sharp anxiety, It is usually because you have decided that some part of your history or your temperament is a mistake. You reach for the metaphorical sandpaper, the constant, grinding friction of self-judgment, and you begin to scrub. You try to smooth out the memory of a conversation you handled poorly, or the way you felt anxious in a moment when you thought you should have been brave. You try to round off the edges of your own humanity, hoping that if you just become enough, smooth enough, and polished enough, you will finally be safe from criticism or disappointment. But notice the result of that effort. It never makes the wood stronger. It only makes it thinner. The Buddhist teaching here is not about becoming cold or indifferent to your own life. It is not asking you to stop caring about your growth or to abandon your responsibilities. It is pointing toward a much softer realization. The suffering you feel is rarely contained within the event that actually happened. The event is a single point in time, a stone that has already fallen. The suffering happens because the mind decides to pick that stone up and carry it, turning it over and over, trying to find a way to make it look different than it does. We add a second layer of pain to the firsts. The first pain is the life itself, the reality that things change, that we make mistakes, and that we are not always as steady as we wish we were. That is simply the nature of being alive. But the second pain, the one that keeps you restless in the dark, is the judgment you pile on top of that reality. It is the insistence that you should be different than you are. When you look at the weaver untangling the thread, you see the alternative to this constant friction. He did not pull. He did not tighten his grip. He simply allowed the fibers to show him where they were naturally knotted, and he gave them the space to loosen on their own. This is what it means to stop polishing. It means looking at the grain of your life, the actual, messy, wonderful, and uneven reality of who you are, and realizing that there is nothing here that needs to be scrubbed away. You do not have to be a finished, high-gloss object to be valid. You are more like a piece of living wood that holds its own history in its rings. The mind often fears that if it stops the polishing, if it stops the constant work of self-correction, it will somehow disappear or lose its purpose. It worries that without the friction of anxiety, it will lose its edge. But this is just a trick of the exhausted heart. The truth is that when you stop trying to force yourself into an artificial shape, you find that you have been holding onto a tremendous amount of tension. You have been holding your breath, waiting for the moment when you are finally good enough to exhale. But you are already here, and you are already the person you have been trying to protect. The grain of your character is not a flaw. It is the strength of the wood. Think about the way you treat your own memories tonight. You may be replaying an old regret, turning it in your mind, as if you could sand it down and make it disappear. But notice the cost of that labor. It takes all your energy. It leaves you feeling raw and exposed. What if, just for this hour, you could put the tools down? What if you could treat the knots in your own history as the natural places where you grew, rather than as evidence that you failed? The weaver did not try to hide the place where the thread was joined. He let it be part of the pattern. Your life is not a wall that must be perfectly flat. It is a tapestry that is being woven in real time. And every knot, every slight irregularity is part of what makes you human. The Buddha taught that we create our own suffering when we refuse to let the present moment be exactly what it is. We fight the reality of our own feelings, and in that fight, we lose the ability to see the space that exists around those feelings. You are not the anxiety. You are the space in which the anxiety is appearing. You are not the mistake you made yesterday. You are the awareness that is looking back at that mistake today. There is a vast, quiet territory inside you that remains untouched by your performance, and it is here that you will find the rest you have been searching for. It is very natural for the mind to keep reaching for the sandpaper because it feels like a form of protection. If you are constantly judging yourself, you might think you are staying one step ahead of the world, but that is a heavy way to live. It keeps the heart in a state of constant defensive flex. You can let that go tonight. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be in the middle of a process that is not yet fully formed. The forest floor does not require the leaves to be perfectly shaped before it lets them rest. It offers the same support to every single one. You are being offered that same support right now. As you listen to the quiet in the room, notice how much of your effort is directed toward maintaining a version of yourself that you think others will approve of. What would happen if you were to release that demand? You do not have to do it all at once. You do not have to solve the knot in your heart tonight. Just allow yourself to sit with the possibility that the friction is not necessary. The stone is beautiful precisely because it is not smooth. The wood is strong precisely because it has grain. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a life to be lived, and you have arrived at a place where you are safe to stop polishing. The next part of our journey will take us into a practice that helps us step out of the cycle of self-correction. We will look at how to place our worries down in a way that is kind and deliberate, letting the mind find its own rhythm again. You are doing well to be here, to be willing to look at these things, and to recognize that the fatigue you feel is only the result of holding a weight you were never meant to carry alone. Stay with this quiet. Let the words fall away and just feel the space they leave behind. For it is in this stillness that you will find the home you have been looking for. If it feels right to you, let your eyes close, or simply soften your gaze until the world around you is nothing more than a gentle, blurred silhouette. You have been carrying the weight of that whetstone for a long time and your hands are tired. You do not need to hold it any longer. Imagine, just for these few minutes, that you are back in that quiet mountain workshop. The air is cool and smells of pine and damp earth. You are standing before your own workbench, but there is no statue to carve tonight. There is only the quiet space of the room and the presence of the light shifting slowly across the floor. Begin by noticing your breath. Do not try to change it. Do not force it to be deep or rhythmic. Just let it be exactly as it is, a natural movement that travels through you, in and out, like a tide pulling away from the shore. With each exhale, imagine the tension in your shoulders beginning to settle. Let the muscles in your jaw loosen and allow the weight of your head to sink fully into the pillow. You are not required to do anything. You are not required to fix yourself. You are simply here, in the stillness of the mountain workshop, and the only thing you have to do is notice. Now, bring to mind one of those thoughts that has been circling your heart tonight. It might be a worry about tomorrow, or a regret from a conversation you wish you could redo. It might be a persistent feeling that you are behind, or that you have failed to smooth over the rough parts of your life. Do not push this thought away. Do not try to fight it or argue with it. Instead, just identify it. Name it silently, like a leaf floating on the surface of a dark pond. Perhaps you can name it tension, or judgment, or the need to be perfect. Just hold it in your awareness as if you were looking at it from across the room. Imagine that you have a wooden bowl sitting on the workbench before you. This is not a bowl for polishing. It is a simple, unadorned vessel, capable of holding whatever you place inside it. Gently, with the grace of the weaver untangling his thread, imagine lifting that thought out of your chest. Do not handle it roughly. Do not try to sand down its edges or make it look different than it does. Simply place it into the bowl. See it clearly, in all its complexity, with its knots and its frayed ends. Notice how it looks when it is no longer being gripped by your own mind, when it is no longer being held under the pressure of your constant scrutiny. Does it change when you place it there? When you stop trying to fix the thought, you might notice that it starts to reveal its true nature. It is not a command. It is not a requirement for your survival. It is just a thought, a flicker of energy that appeared in your mind, and you are the space that is large enough to contain it. You do not have to be the thought. You are the one who is watching it. Breathe in and feel the coolness of the air. Breathe out and see the bowl sitting quietly on the wood, holding the worry but not being burdened by it. If your mind wanders and you find yourself reaching back for the whetstone, that is perfectly fine. You are not failing. You are simply noticing your own habit of trying to fix the unfixable. If that happens, just gently observe the urge to pick up the tool again. Watch it for a moment. Feel the physical sensation of that urge, the tightness in your chest, the quickening of your heartbeat. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement of your imagination, set the tool back down on the bench. You do not need it right now. The wood of your life is already strong enough. Take another slow breath and let your focus widen. You are not just the thoughts in the bowl. You are the workshop itself. You are the vast, quiet space that remains when the activity of the day is put aside. In this space, there is room for everything, even the doubts and the fears that you have been trying to polish away. They are not mistakes. They are just part of the landscape of your inner world, like the grain in the timber or the shadows in the corner of the room. You can let them be. You can allow them to exist without needing to change them or hide them from the world. There is no clock in this workshop. There is no deadline for your healing. You do not have to finish this practice feeling enlightened or peaceful or entirely whole. You only have to show up and acknowledge that you are carrying a load that was never meant for you to bear alone. If you feel like weeping, let the tears come. They are not a sign of weakness. They are the natural way the body releases the tension of the day. If you feel like simply drifting, then drift. You are safe here, and you are already enough. As you continue to sit with the image of the bowl, notice how the light has changed. The shadows are longer now, and the room feels even quieter. Your own breath has become slower, more effortless. You are not doing anything to earn this, and you are not doing anything to deserve it. You are simply letting the natural rhythm of your own heart take over. The thoughts you placed in the bowl are still there, but they are no longer pulling on you. They are just objects, resting in a vessel, waiting for you to decide what to do with them. And for now, you can leave them where they are. You have done enough for today. You have looked at the pattern, you have recognized the friction, and you have chosen, even if just for a moment, to let the sandpaper go. That is a profound act of compassion. That is the beginning of a different way of existing in your own skin. Stay with this sensation of openness. Feel the way your body rests against the support beneath you, and realize that you are held by the earth just as surely as the stone rests upon the mountain. Nothing is being asked of you tonight. You are allowed to be unfinished, to be unpolished, and to be exactly as you are. There is a deep, quiet strength in that. A strength that does not need to prove anything to anyone. Feel the stillness and let it wrap around you like a heavy, comforting cloak. You are doing well, and you are safe to simply exist in this space for as long as you like. Years later, in a distant monastery, perched on a cliffside where the wind never truly settles, there lived an older cook named Kenji. He was a man who had dedicated his life to the art of temple cuisine, believing that his worth was tied entirely to the precision of his service. He was known for his mastery of a delicate vegetable soup, a dish that required dozens of ingredients to be sliced to the exact same dimension. He felt that if even one sliver of ginger was uneven, he had failed his community. He had spent decades in the kitchen, his brow constantly furrowed, his hands moving with a frantic, precise energy that never allowed for a moment of quiet. He lived in terror of the day his hands would shake or his concentration would slip, believing that a single mistake would reveal him as a fraud who had been hiding behind his competence for his entire life. One evening, a visiting master arrived at the monastery, a woman who was famously unhurried and walked with the lightness of someone who had long ago stopped trying to impress the world. Kenji was tasked with preparing the evening meal. He was already spiraling, his mind calculating the timing of the broth, the heat of the fire, and the exact arrangement of the bowls. He felt that this meal had to be his finest performance. He had chosen the most difficult ingredients, the ones that required the most surgical precision to prepare. As the sun began to dip behind the jagged peaks, he was rushing, his knife a blur of motion, his breath held tight in his chest. The kitchen was hot, filled with the sharp smell of boiling water and the heavy, sweet scent of roasting root vegetables. He reached for his favorite, long-handled wooden spoon to stir the boiling pot, but as he moved toward the hearth, his heel caught on a loose floorboard. He stumbled. The spoon flew from his hand, clattering across the stone floor, and the heavy iron pot lurched, spilling a significant portion of the precious soup onto the hearth. A cloud of steam hissed into the air, and for a terrifying moment, the kitchen went deathly silent. Kenji froze. He felt the cold shock of failure wash over him, a physical weight that pressed against his ribs and made it hard to breathe. He expected to hear the master's voice, to be told he was clumsy, or worse, to be ignored entirely for his incompetence. He stood there, staring at the puddle of ruined soup, his heart racing with the familiar, suffocating rhythm of his own judgment. He was already mentally sandblasting himself, calling himself weak, unready, and entirely unworthy of his station. He waited for the reprimand. He waited for the proof that he was, and had always been, an unfinished, unpolished mess. But the kitchen door creaked open, and the visiting master stepped inside. She did not look at the spill with disappointment. She did not look at Kenji with pity. She simply walked over, picked up the fallen wooden spoon from the floor, and began to help him scrape the remaining uneven vegetables from the cutting board into a secondary, smaller pot. She did not tell him to clean the mess. She did not ask him to fix the soup. She simply asked if he had any miso paste left, and when he nodded, she began to stir a new, simpler mixture into the remaining broth. She did not offer a grand lecture on perfection. She only said that the best meals were the ones that included the unexpected, and that a cook who could not cook with what remained was a cook who had forgotten the taste of life. Kenji watched her hands. They were weathered and calm, moving with a rhythm that had nothing to do with the frantic speed he had been using. She was not trying to make the meal perfect. She was simply trying to make it, and she was doing it with a presence that felt entirely unshakable. Kenji felt his throat tighten, not from the fear of failure this time, but from the sudden, jarring relief of being seen in his brokenness and not being rejected. He took a breath, a long, shaky inhalation that traveled all the way to the bottom of his lungs. And for the first time in his life, he let go of the invisible tool he had been using to punish himself. He realized that the world had not ended because the pot had spilled. The sky had not fallen. The master was still there, the fire was still warm, and he was still a human being, regardless of whether the soup was perfect. He took the spoon from the master's hand. He did not rush. He did not try to make the soup look like the one he had intended to serve. He simply tasted it. It was different. It was simpler. A little more rustic, perhaps a bit uneven, but it was honest. As he served the meal in the simple, chipped ceramic bowls of the temple, he noticed that he was no longer holding his breath. He was no longer waiting for a mistake to be discovered. He served the master. Then he sat down on the floor to eat his own portion, and he realized that the taste of the soup was not the point. The point was the space that had opened up between him and his own need to be flawless. The transformation was not that he became a perfect cook. It was that he became a cook who knew how to let the pot spill without his spirit breaking. He continued to work in the kitchen, but the frantic rhythm was gone. When he cut the vegetables, he allowed for the natural curve of the produce, and when he made a mistake, he didn't try to hide it. He simply adjusted, using the error as part of the meal, just as the master had taught him. The kitchen was still hot and the work was still demanding, but the heavy, grinding sound of his inner critic had faded into the background, replaced by the quiet, steady sound of his own breathing. He had stopped trying to polish the surface of his life, and he had finally, truly begun to live in it. The soup was enough. The cook was enough. The day was enough. And in the quiet of that mountain kitchen, he found a peace that no amount of perfection could ever have provided. It is common to believe that if we just had a clearer view of the road ahead, we would stop stumbling. You might imagine that your anxiety is a sensible response to the fact that you do not know what tomorrow will bring. You feel that if you could only replay the past with enough focus, or rehearse the future with enough precision, you could finally secure a version of your life that was safe from any sudden, jarring changes. This is the way of the mind. It operates on the assumption that control is the only barrier between you and ruin. It treats the grain of your life like a flaw to be corrected, and it treats your mistakes like evidence that you are not building the statue correctly. However, consider the nature of the wood itself. When a carpenter works with timber, they do not fight. The grain, they do not assume that a knot in the wood is a sign of a failed tree. They understand that the knot is simply the place where a branch once grew. It is the record of the tree reaching toward the light, a physical marker of its struggle and its growth. If you were to try and sand that knot until it disappeared, you would lose the very strength of the timber. You would be left with a piece of wood that is weak, hollowed out, and incapable of holding any real weight. Your mind does something similar when it tries to turn your pain into an identity. You feel a sting of sadness or the cold prickle of insecurity, and you immediately reach for your tools. You begin to question why you felt that way. You judge yourself for having felt it. And you start to weave a story about what that feeling says about your worth. You are not just experiencing the sadness, which is the first natural pain of being human. You are building a whole structure of judgment on top of it. This is the second layer, the artificial polish that keeps you up at night. You are not struggling with the event itself anymore. You are struggling with your demand that the event should not have happened at all. Think about the effort required to keep that wall of perfection standing. It is exhausting. You are constantly scanning your own thoughts, looking for the next place where you might be seen as less than smooth, less than ideal. You are terrified that if you drop your guard, if you admit that you are still in process, you will lose your standing. But this fear is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes a life meaningful. We are not here to be finished products. We are here to be part of the ongoing, messy, and beautiful process of existence. The moment you stop trying to justify your own humanity, you find that the world does not actually demand perfection from you. It only demands that you be present. The Buddhist way of seeing this is to recognize that we are not the ones who must hold the world together. The anxiety that tells you are the captain of every outcome is a liar. It wants you to believe that if you stop worrying, the world will unravel. But the tide turns without your permission. The sun rises without your encouragement. The seasons shift without your oversight. You are part of that same vast process. When you let go of the need to polish every surface of your life, you are not giving up. You are finally participating in the life that is already happening, rather than standing on the sidelines, trying to direct it. This distance to the present moment is what creates the friction. When you refuse to feel the uncomfortable parts of your history, or when you panic at the sight of a new uncertainty, you are like someone trying to swim against a strong river. The river is going to flow regardless. You are only wearing yourself out by trying to push the water in the other direction. If you could stop swimming and just float, you would find that the river supports you. It does not mean you have no agency. It means your actions become intentional rather than desperate. But take a moment to notice where you are holding this tension right now. Is it in the way you hold your jaw, or the way your thoughts seem to lock onto a specific fear? Just observe it. There is no need to push it away. This is not about becoming numb or indifferent. It is about becoming vast. When you stop turning your pain into an identity, you see that the pain is just a visitor. It arrived. It made its presence known, and eventually it will move on. It does not need you to build a house for it. It does not need you to protect it or apologize for it. The fear of uncertainty is another layer of the same struggle. You want to know that you are safe, so you create a script for how things should happen. But when reality inevitably deviates from your script, you feel the sting of the gap between what you wanted and what is. That gap is where suffering lives. It lives in the should have been and the what if. If you could close that gap by accepting that you do not need to know the ending, you would find a deep, resonant peace. You would realize that you are capable of meeting whatever comes without needing to have prepared for it perfectly in advance. Self-judgment is perhaps the heaviest tool of all. It is the sandpaper you use until your fingers bleed. But what if you saw your mistakes as the grain of your life? What if you realized that every time you stumbled, you were also learning how to stand up again? That is not a failure. That is the architecture of wisdom. You do not need to hide your history to be worthy of rest. You are worthy because you are here, because you are breathing, and because you have the capacity to witness your own unfolding. There is a quality of mind that is like the deep, still center of a mountain pond. It is clear, it is calm, and it is undisturbed by the wind that ripples the surface. You have that center within you. You have been looking for it in the polished, surface-level achievements of your life, but it was always there, waiting in the depths. You can touch that place right now. You do not need to do anything to earn it. You do not need to be any different than you are in this very breath. As you listen to the silence of the room, consider the possibility that your struggle has been a form of love. You were trying to protect yourself, and you were trying to find a way to be safe. That is a natural, human impulse. You do not need to judge yourself for the way you have tried to survive, but you can acknowledge that the methods you used, while well-intentioned, are no longer serving your peace. You can set them down. You can let the tools fall from your hands. The room is quiet. The air is cool. And you are exactly where you need to be to begin this final turn toward home. You have been doing the work of being human, and that is enough. You are allowed to stop polishing. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to let the day dissolve, along with the need to keep everything perfectly in place. Just breathe, and let the space you have created hold you. This way of seeing is not reserved for mountain workshops or quiet temple kitchens. It is meant for the kitchen in your own home, for the light of your phone screen in the dark, and for the moments when you are standing in line, waiting for the world to move just a little faster. You have spent so much of your life trying to sand down the edges of your days, hoping to create a smooth, frictionless path where no mistakes can be made. But life is not a flat, polished surface. It is the wood. It is the grain. It is the knots that appear when you least expect them. Think about the times you check your phone for reassurance, waiting for a message that will tell you you are valued, or for a sign that your life is finally heading in the right direction. There is a deep, quiet hunger in that impulse, a desire to be told that you are doing enough. But when the phone remains silent, you feel the familiar ache of the unpolished surface. You start to sand it down with your own judgment, whispering that your lack of a message is proof of your inadequacy. In that moment, you are holding the whetstone with white-knuckled intensity. To look like safety, what would happen if you simply noticed the itch in your hand? What if you recognize the urge to check the screen for what it is? A small, flicking movement of the mind, trying to protect itself from the discomfort of uncertainty. You do not have to be a master of the spirit to practice this. You only have to be a witness to your own restlessness. Breathe in and feel the air. Breathe out and let the phone rest on the table. You are not losing your worth by leaving the message unread. You are simply practicing the art of living with the grain of your own life, exactly as it is, without needing to force an immediate resolution. It is the same when you lie awake at night, replaying a mistake from the afternoon or a regret from years ago. Your mind is like a carpenter who has forgotten that the building is already finished. You are still trying to chisel away at the past, hoping that if you polish the memory enough, it will stop hurting. But the memory is already etched into the wood. It is part of the grain now. You can stop sanding. You can acknowledge that the regret is there, but you do not have to pick up the tool. You do not have to engage with the friction. You can simply notice that the mind is spinning, and you can invite it to slow down, like a wheel that has finally been taken off the fire. You might worry that if you stop trying to fix everything, you will become lazy or indifferent. But this is the fear of the whetstone talking. True discipline is not the frantic, grinding energy of the critic. It is the steady, patient work of the weaver who knows that a tapestry cannot be rushed. It is the ability to care deeply about your relationships, your work, and your own growth without needing to grip them so tightly that you crush the life out of them. You can show up for your responsibilities with a heart that is wide open, rather than a heart that is clenched in a protective fist. This is the meaning of caring without gripping. When you are with someone you love, you do not have to supervise their every movement or control the flow of the conversation to ensure they are happy. You can simply be there. You can let the space between you exist, with all its natural gaps and irregularities. You do not have to polish the interaction to make it perfect. You only have to be present, and in that presence, the other person feels seen, not for the version of them you want them to be, but for who they actually are. And what of the guilt you feel when you finally allow yourself to rest? You have been conditioned to believe that you must be in a state of constant production to be worthy of your place in this world. But look at the forest. It does not produce anything while it is sleeping. Yet it is not failing. The trees do not work to earn their place in the canopy. They simply exist, and in their existence, they provide a home for everything around them. You have a right to your own quiet. You have a right to put the tools down, not because you have earned it by finishing your work, but because you are a living being who requires the deep, soft support of the night to continue. There will be days when you forget this. You will pick up the sandpaper again, and you will find yourself grinding away at your own character, trying to make the knots disappear. That is not a failure. That is just the habit of the mind. When you notice yourself doing it, do not judge yourself for having picked up the tool. That would only be adding a second layer of friction. Instead, simply smile at the habit, recognize it, put the tool down, and take a long, slow breath. The grain of your life is beautiful, and it is honest. It does not need you to hide it. You are moving through your life, not as a statue that must be displayed, but as a person who is constantly learning how to be at home in their own skin. Every time you pause, every time you choose not to follow a thought into a dark, heavy corridor, and every time you forgive yourself for being unfinished, you are practicing a deep and sacred form of kindness. You are not trying to reach a state of polished perfection. You are trying to reach a state of simple, honest presence. And as the night deepens, you can start to feel the difference between the effort you were exerting earlier and the quiet, natural support that is here for you now, the world outside. The window is continuing its own rhythm. The wind is moving through the trees, the earth is turning, and you are being carried along with it. You do not need to oversee the movement of the stars. You do not need to manage the tides of your own history. You are invited to stop directing the play and to finally take your seat in the audience, where you can watch the life you are living with a heart that is no longer trying to change the script. This is the practice for tomorrow and for every day that follows. It is the practice of small, gentle shifts. It is the decision to trust that the wood is strong enough, that the grain is meaningful, and that you are already complete in your unfinished state. You are not a problem that needs to be solved. You are a miracle that is unfolding in real time. And tonight, before you finally drift into the depth of your rest, remember that the sandpaper has no power over you unless you decide to pick it up. You are safe to let your hands rest, empty and open, for the very first time. The workshop is quiet now. The heavy stone dust has long since settled. and the moonlight finds its way into the open space where you have been standing. Everything you have been carrying today, the sharp edges of your past and the imagined demands of tomorrow, can simply be laid down here. You are not required to do anything with the wood of your life tonight. You do not have to carve it. You do not have to polish it. And you certainly do not have to defend it. The grain is what it is, and it is more than enough. Feel the weight of your own body sinking into the surface beneath you. It is a support that asks nothing in return. It does not demand that you be a certain shape or that you present a certain finish to the world. It simply accepts your weight, and you can trust that it is strong enough to hold you while you drift. As your breathing slows, let the image of the workbench fade. Let the tools fall from your mind as easily as dry leaves. Slip from a branch, you are becoming as still as the mountain hemlocks in the deep of the night. Think of your thoughts as nothing more than the movement of mist across a valley. They appear, they shift in the moonlight, and then they dissolve back into the vast, dark air. There is no need to grasp at them. There is no need to label them as good or bad, or to worry about what they imply about your character. They are just the atmosphere of the evening, and you are the quiet mountain that allows them to pass. You are not the mist. You are the space that holds it, and that space is wide and calm and profoundly safe. The fatigue you feel is not a failure. It is the natural closing of a day that has been lived. You have looked at the knots in your own history, and you have chosen not to sand them away. You have looked at the uneven places in your own temperament, and you have chosen to let them be. That is the true work of the night. It is the work of stopping the friction and allowing the heart to finally unbend. You have done the work of being human, and that is a task that earns its own rest. As you slip further into the stillness, let go of the need to understand everything. You do not need to know where your path leads tomorrow, or how you will handle the next challenge that arises. You do not need to solve the pattern of your life before you close your eyes. The pattern is already being woven by the rhythm of existence itself, and you are part of that weaving, whether you are awake or asleep. You can trust the process. You can trust the grain of your own heart to guide you when the sun rises. There is a profound silence waiting for you. It is not the absence of life, but the presence of a peace that has been there all along, beneath the constant work of trying to be someone else. You are coming home to the unfinished, raw, and honest version of yourself, the one that does not need to be displayed or improved. It is a version of you that is capable of deep rest, because it has finally stopped trying to survive its own existence. You are safe, you are held, you are enough. The room grows darker, and the hum of the day fades into the distant, cool air. Your hands are relaxed, your chest is open, and your mind is becoming like the surface of a deep mountain lake under the light of a hidden moon. Nothing is rushing you. Nothing is waiting for you to perform. There is only the rhythm of your breath and the gentle, slow descent into a sleep that will mend you better than any effort ever could. Everything you are holding has been set down. The wood is resting. The spirit is quiet. Let the last of the words drift away, like smoke that has lost its heat. Let the images of the workshop, the stone, the weaver, and the cook fade into the shadows of your own mind. You are stepping into the deep, dark, and protective embrace of the night. There is nothing left for you to do, and there is nowhere left for you to go. You have reached the end of the journey, and you have arrived exactly where you were always meant to be. What if the rest you have been searching for was never a prize to be won by your labor, but simply the quiet realization that you were never the one who needed to finish the stone. The quiet that has gathered in this room is not merely an absence of sound. It is a presence, a deep and velvet texture that is beginning to fill the spaces where your anxiety used to live. You might notice that your breathing has become slower, more deliberate, as if your lungs have finally remembered how to expand without the constant, jagged interruption of a racing mind. This is the work of rest. It is the work of allowing the day to finish on its own terms, without you needing to sign off on every detail or resolve every lingering uncertainty. You are no longer required to carry the heavy whetstone of perfection. You are no longer required to justify the grain of your own existence. You are allowed to be precisely as you are, and that is a relief that reaches deep into the marrow of your bones. Consider the way the night air moves against the skin, cool and indifferent to the plans you made or the mistakes you think you carry. It does not ask for an account of your labor. It does not demand to see the finished work. It simply wraps around you a dark and protective cloak that asks only for your surrender. When you give yourself permission to let the day fall away, you are not failing to be productive. You are honoring the most fundamental truth of your own life, that you are a part of the rhythm of this world, not the architect of it. The earth will continue to turn. While you sleep, the stars will continue their long, slow migration across the void. The problems that seemed so mountainous at midday will find their true scale in the silence of this hour. And you, dear friend, will wake to a version of yourself that is slightly more rested, slightly more capable of meeting the next moment with kindness. There is a profound freedom in realizing that you can be unpolished and still be whole. The grain of your character is not a defect to be sanded away. It is the unique signature of your journey, the places where you were tested and where you learned to grow. Every knot in your life is a story, a marker of a moment where you were asked to endure, to change, and to expand. To try to smooth these away is to try to erase the very history that has forged your strength instead. Invite yourself to look at these parts of your story with a gaze that is not seeking correction, but acknowledgement, just as you might look at a piece of ancient wood and marvel at the way the rings tell the story of a long sun-drenched season or a cold, harsh winter. You can look at your own history with the same patient, observant curiosity. You do not have to love every moment of that history to accept it. You only have to stop using it as a weapon against your own peace. As your body settles deeper into the bedding, notice the way your weight is supported. You are held by the architecture of this room, by the floor, by the earth itself. There is no need for you to hold yourself up. There is no need to keep your guard raised against the unknown. The darkness that surrounds you is not an empty, threatening void. It is a fertile, waiting space. It is the soil from which new clarity will eventually emerge. But you do not need to plant anything tonight. You do not need to cultivate any new wisdom. You only need to rest. The wisdom is already here, woven into the stillness, waiting only for you to grow quiet enough to perceive it. Many nights, the mind keeps pacing because it fears that, if it finally stops, it will lose its grip on reality. It fears that, if it lets go of the worry, the catastrophe it has been imagining will suddenly have room to manifest. This is the oldest, most tired trick of the ego. It convinces you that your suffering is the barrier that keeps the world from falling apart. But the world is not held together by your apprehension. It is held together by forces far more ancient and reliable than the narrow focus of an anxious mind. Your peace does not endanger the world, it stabilizes it. When you are calm, when you are settled, you are contributing a quality of presence that is more valuable than any amount of frantic, fearful oversight. You are contributing the quality of a quiet, steady light in a room that often feels too dim. Feel the sensation of your jaw letting go. It is a small, subtle release, but it ripples through the rest of your body, telling the shoulders, the neck, and the chest that the struggle is paused. There is no crisis happening in this room. There is no demand that you be anywhere other than here. You are not missing an opportunity. You are not failing to achieve some hidden standard of rest. You are simply practicing the art of being, and that is a skill that only develops in the dark. It is in these moments where nothing is happening and nothing is needed that you reclaim the parts of yourself that were lost in the noise of the day. You reclaim your breath. You reclaim your stillness. You reclaim the right to exist without condition. If a thought wanders into your mind now, do not try to catch it or wrestle it to the ground. Let it pass through your awareness like a cloud drifting over a mountain peak. The cloud does not stain the peak. It does not alter the mountain's shape. It simply makes the journey across the sky and then vanishes into the vast, open blue. Your thoughts are the same. They are events in the space of your consciousness, not definitions of your reality. You can watch them with the same detached, gentle interest with which you might watch a river flowing at the base of a canyon. You see the movement, you hear the sound of the water, but you do not need to jump in. You can stay here, on the bank, in the safe, dry comfort of the present. The peace you have been searching for has always been a quality of your own awareness, not an achievement of your character. It is the space that remains when the drama of the ego has finally quieted down. It is the clarity of the mirror that, when the dust of the day has been wiped away, you have spent so much time trying to manufacture peace as if it were a commodity you could earn or a prize you could win through the force of your will. But peace is not a destination. It is the terrain upon which you are already walking. It is the soil beneath your feet. It is the air in your lungs. It is the quiet, steady beating of your heart that continues, even when you are not thinking about it, even when you have forgotten that it is there. As you drift closer to sleep, feel the edges of your identity beginning to soften. The labels you use, the ones that say you are tired, or anxious, or behind in your life, are starting to lose their sharp edges. They are becoming softer, more porous, less able to hold you in their narrow definition. You are becoming something much larger and more mysterious than the story you have been telling yourself. You are the awareness that witnesses the story, and that awareness is vast and clear and entirely untouched by the events of the day. You are the sky, and the weather is just the weather. It will change. It will pass, and you will remain. Notice how the room feels as you exhale. There is a sense of deepening, a sinking into the comfort of the space you have curated for yourself. You have earned this moment of surrender. You have navigated the complexities of your day. You have faced the challenges of your history, and you have remained whole enough to find your way to this bed. That is an act of profound courage. Many people live their entire lives without ever stopping to acknowledge the weight they carry, let alone setting it down. You have done the work of witnessing yourself, and now you are being invited to stop working altogether. The night is a gentle mentor. It teaches you that you are not the center of the world's labor. It teaches you that you are allowed to stop. If you find yourself waking in the middle of the night, do not be afraid. Do not panic and reach for your internal tools, your self-judgment, or your list of things to fix. Just notice the quiet. Take a breath and feel the coolness of the air. Remember that you are in the same state of surrender, that the mountain workshop is still there, that the weaver is still working, and that the soup is still enough. The world has not changed. You are still safe. You are still being held by the rhythm of existence. You can simply turn, breathe, and sink back into the soft velvet dark. Nothing is required of you until the sun rises, and even then, it will be one moment at a time. Imagine the feeling of being a vessel that has finally been emptied. All the plans, all the regrets, all the subtle judgments you've collected, they have been poured out into the quiet earth. You are clear, you are light, you are ready to be filled, not with the busy energy of the world, but with the deep, replenishing silence of the night. This is the true meaning of resting. It is not just the absence of movement, it is the presence of a deep inner harmony. It is the alignment of your spirit with the slow circular motion of the universe. Feel your toes relaxing. Let that wave of ease travel up through your ankles, your calves, your knees. There is no tension left here. The legs that carried you through the day can now be heavy, grounded, and completely still. Let the sensation move into your hips, your belly, your lower back. Each muscle releases its grip, one by one, like a knot coming undone in a well-worn piece of fabric. The breath moves into these spaces, bringing with it a quiet, cooling relief. You are not holding anything together anymore. You are letting the architecture of your own body return to its natural, relaxed state. The chest and the shoulders are next. Let the armor fall away. You do not need to present yourself as strong or capable tonight. You can be vulnerable, you can be soft, and you can be completely undefended. The heart inside this chest is strong enough to beat without your constant supervision. The lungs can do their work without your encouragement. You can finally step back from the control tower and simply be the passenger of your own life. You are moving in the right direction, and you don't need to steer. The current of existence knows the way home. Let your arms be heavy at your sides, or folded softly across your body. The hands, which have done so much grasping, so much fixing, so much pointing, are finally still. They don't need to hold anything right now, not even the memory of what they held today. Release the fingers. Release the palms. Let the intelligence of the body take over, the wisdom that knows how to repair and restore itself without any input from the thinking mind. You are drifting into a place where the ego cannot follow, a place where you are simply life itself, breathing, resting, and renewing. The neck and the head are the last to surrender. Let the tension in the scalp dissolve. Let the muscles around the eyes grow heavy and warm. You do not need to look at anything, not even the thoughts that flicker in your mind. The eyes can stay closed, and the mind can stay still. You are entering the realm of the deep, where the roots of your soul are anchored in the quiet, nourishing dark. Everything is settling. Everything is coming into balance. The work of the day is finished, and the work of the night has only just begun. You are entering a space of total permission. There is no one who can reach you here to demand anything of you. There is no duty, no responsibility, and no expectation. You are entirely alone with the silence, and the silence is your friend. It is the original state from which you were born, and it is the state to which you will return. In this space, there is no need for perfection, no need for approval, and no need to be anything other than what you are right now. You are enough. You have always been enough. And as you sink into the final layer of this rest, you can feel that truth beginning to take root in your heart, steady and immovable. The night is moving through you now, a tide of quiet that washes away the last remnants of the day's fatigue. You are not losing consciousness. You are expanding into it, becoming a part of the stillness that surrounds the world. Feel the boundaries of your body blurring as if you were not just a person lying in a bed, but a part of the darkness, a part of the stars, a part of the endless, breathing mystery of the universe. There is no separation. There is no distance between you and the peace you are looking for. It is the very thing you are breathing in. It is the very thing you are resting on. Stay in this place of total release. Do not rush to the edge of the dream. Just linger here, in the doorway of the night, where the light is soft and the world is far away. You have done the work of being human today. You have weathered the storms and the sunshine, and you have remained against all odds. A soul that is capable of stillness, and that, in itself, is the greatest accomplishment of all. The quiet is deep, the breath is thin, and you are ready to let go of everything that is not essential. You are ready to enter the vast, refreshing, and entirely perfect silence. And now, as the last of your focus begins to dissolve into the dark, ask yourself one final thing to carry into the stillness. What if the home you were looking for was the quiet awareness that never left you?